Okay, let's start. There we go. Okay, so thank you all very much for coming to this tiny little room. For those of you who are online, this is a tiny little room. Thank you for attending the DOD MURI opportunity kickoff. So what we have branded these as our opportunity level kickoff. So we're talking about a solicitation, and the idea behind an opportunity kickoff is to introduce a solicitation. You talk about the program itself, you talk about the opportunity, you talk about the funding, and then you meet with faculty who have previous experience, positive or negative, with the program. We are very lucky to have several people who are able to speak about positive experience and being awarded in the program. So this is probably our 4th year of doing kickoffs on the DOD MURI. I'll insert some data towards the end on that progress over time. But right now we're going to talk, Keith's going to talk a little bit about our past award experience at ASU. Then Jamie from Global Security Initiative is going to speak about working with, interfacing with DOD. Then I'm going to do a little bit of a deeper dive into the cycle itself, which will include some of the dates. And then we'll jump right into the faculty experience panel. And that one will be a little bit more free-flowing because the faculty have varied experience and very different disciplines. And so I prepared prompts for each of the presenters just to talk a little bit about what they bring to the table and what their experience is. But we'll have the majority of time for fielding questions online. Because we have such a huge online presence, which of course, thank you very much for dialing in online, we'll be able to moderate that. I'll be in the back. If somebody mutes or unmutes or needs help with that, just let me know. And then we'll wrap that panel up and you'll all be free and ready to go. We are recording this event, so please be cognizant of we won't be sending it out to a wide variety of people, but be cognizant of the proprietary comments that you might want to make. So with that, Keith.
I'm Keith Aspinall. I'm a senior competitive intelligence analyst on Bay's research development team. I'll just be reviewing quickly some of our research histories with DOD. DOD, as you all know, is a research or is a mission-driven entity that focuses on the results of the research, and ASU is improving its stature in that area. This takes a look at what we have done specifically with the research offices, DARPA, Army Research Lab, Air Force Research Lab, and Office of Naval Research in the last 5 calendar years. We've gotten $125 million of awards from over 250 awards, so about 500K each, and 126 different investigators, or principal investigators. Of the $125 million, about 3/4 of it is in engineering, about 20% is in class, and that's by recognized, it's not necessarily a PI affiliation. So there's been a big emphasis on that, and GSI's kind of led the charge in developing those relationships. With MURI specifically, over the last 10 years, we have $16.5 million of awards. This funded investigators, 19, that's total number of investigators, not just the PIs. And this includes subawards and primes. We're the lead, and there have been 14 awards. Interestingly, with MURI, classes is more prominent. About 60% of the recognized dollars in MURI are the college faculty, with about 40% in engineering.
Okay, that's how easy and quick it is.
Nice. Great, thanks. I'm Jamie Winterton. I'm the Director of Strategy at the Global Security Initiative. And just wanted to talk a little bit about working with the DOD broadly, because it's very different than working with NSF or industry or foundations. So I think the next chart,
this.
Cool, thanks.
Yeah.
How to assess if you're answering the right kind of questions. I always guide people to the Heilmeyer Catechism or the Heilmeyer questions. So these are a set of questions that came up. They were created by a former director of DARPA, George H. Heilmeyer. And this is how DARPA evaluates their proposals. But even though MURIs aren't to DARPA, Answering these questions will help you align what you're trying to say with what the DoD is interested in. I don't have time to go through all of these. You can look through them, and there's been plenty written out there. So I'll just focus on a couple of them that people tend to miss. So the first one is, what are you trying to do? Articulate your objectives using absolutely no jargon. Most of the time people read this question as, what are you trying to do from a scientific perspective? But to Keith's point previously, remember that the DoD is a mission-based organization. So really this question is, what problem are you trying to solve? And how are you trying to solve it? So I reviewed a white paper recently from a group that was doing some interesting things with biofilms. And they started, what are you trying to do? We're going to calculate the Debye length of the things and I was like, okay, cool, but not the question they're actually asking. What are you going to use these for? So their next reversion came back and they said, you know, infections are a problem with injured warfighters, and we're trying to create novel ways to protect against infections. That is what you're trying to do. So answering the question from the point of the mission perspective instead of what's the content, you'll get a chance to get into the content. Obviously, you'll want to explain what you're going to do, but lead off with the mission here. The other thing that people tend to miss is kind of the blend of 2 and 3. How is it done today and what's new in your approach? People usually skip to number 3 and just talk about what they're doing, which is great. Obviously you should, but contrast it against what's going on out there already. So to go back to the biofilms perspective, I asked them to answer this question a little more, and they said, okay, great, like let's contrast what we want to do with these biofilms against the traditional approach of antibiotics. So it's not how is it done today in the area that you're pursuing specifically, but how is the problem that the DoD is trying to answer being done today. I usually tag team things like this with my proposal manager, Christina Nelson. She sent me a Slack message this morning saying that she was out sick, but in wonderful Christina style, she drafted a set of points for me to draw. I know, it's got it's labeled, it's got bold in there, like seriously, this is why I call her Eagle Eye Nelson, because she is on it. So she has some recommendations from the logistical side of putting together your proposal. The first one that we always hit is talk to your RA. Even if you're not sure that you're going to propose, just talk to them, let them know. RAs are super busy people, and they're spinning plates while juggling, riding on the back of a horse. So help them out and know what to expect. She also recommends going through these and just answering the Heilmeier questions, even if it's not necessarily the format of the submission. You can use that text, and this is a really good exercise to go through and just think about what it is you're actually doing. She recommends think about the timeline and whether you can realistically complete the proposal. So some of these tend to be very big, detailed proposals and take up a lot of time if you have a lot of travel or conferences. Maybe this isn't the one where you should be the lead, but you should support somebody else. She also says at the beginning of the proposal, delegate the facilities blurb and CVs to somebody else. Get some help on these pieces that don't require your subject matter expertise, so you can spend the time really fleshing out the content of what the proposal is asking. And she recommends, think of a red team review as mandatory and not optional. I absolutely second this. Even when I write something, I get a red team review because I have blind spots. We all have blind spots in what we write, and just getting somebody else to go through and do an assessment of, hey, this wasn't quite clear, this could be considered jargon, stuff like that. And then she says, thanks, I'm going back to sleep. So I really appreciate her doing that. One other thing I wanted to note about the MURI is that you'll notice at the end of these topics that there's a name of a person and how to get a hold of them. And you should find that person and read about them and then get a hold of them and talk about this idea. So think about putting your idea together, what it's going to look like, but they give you this information for a reason. It's because they want you to reach out. And for a lot of people that haven't worked with the DOD, this is super awkward, but there's a reason that information's out there. So please.
Thanks. Okay. Oh. Okay, so Amanda's turn. So we're gonna go Amanda, Faye, and then Dana is gonna talk maybe. We'll see if I walk right over. Yeah. So Amanda, can you? There is, I'm gonna dime these out, is that there is some discussion about funding, future funding for this program. Do you think you could introduce yourself, what your role at ASU is, and kind of speak to the funding landscape for the federal government right now in this program.
Yeah, I'm happy to. So Amanda Arnold, Federal Research Relations Executive Director out here in the Washington office for ASU. There is always a question, I will just note, about MURI and Minerva. Every single year it is on the list of things that the president's budget might cut, and that's frankly just because the president's budget tends to cut things. So the president's budget request comes out for the congressional budget request. So the president's budget tends to cut things they know Congress will put back in order to put in their new cool ideas that they want to do, knowing that they're not actually offering any real, lambs to the slaughter as far as programs. So just note that MURI and Minerva, we're always as an advocacy group within the higher ed community, making sure that the importance of these research programs within DOD. Worth noting, this is the first year since 2013 that we've actually had a problem in current projects potentially being shortened or something, and I'll tell you why. So in 2013, we had this crazy thing called sequestration, which just basically brought the ceiling down on everything because of the Budget Control Act, and so that had nothing to do with the program itself. Every program was in that kind of jeopardy. And so that was the last time we dealt with like this level of impact. And so we've had a couple notes this year, and this is just to give you some sense for what you're getting into, but it's still worth continuing. But I will say we've had a couple notes this year of people having their programs like any grant that's sometimes in question, being pushed back or something like that. And so we did look into it, and it turns out DOD was reorganized research-wise in the last 2 years and the new head came over from NASA, Mike Griffin, the DDR and ES&T group within DOD, and he's not a major fan of social sciences, and very specifically isn't sure that Minerva and MURI are the right programs. Now, we're going to convince him otherwise. And Congress is certainly going to fund it because they always fund it. So I'll just say, just to give you that context, the advocacy community, it's one of the top efforts we do every single year. Things like the space grant, there's the Sea grant. There's constant kind of research programs we're constantly advocating for, and this is one of them. And so I don't think that should keep you from applying, and I just think it should give you a little bit of background information. So if someone says, "Oh, I don't know about that program, it might be on the chopping block," you can say, "Oh, I know all about that. It's fine. It's a great program. I'm going to go ahead and apply." So just to give you that background.
Fantastic. We're going to try and remain optimistic. The faculty panel can do otherwise. Thank you, Amanda. I appreciate that. And you're eternally optimistic. Okay, so my job, and I'm going to hide your face so you don't have to mock me anymore. There you go. Okay. So last year's awards dropped just when the solicitation dropped. So we actually did it. We have two amazing people, Keith and Jamie, in our competitive intelligence group. And Jamie's actually done an analysis of the awards every year. So she's in the process of updating that award analysis. And that will be deliverable to you guys by Friday, along with any kind of proposal shell docs and checklists that you might need to make the decision of whether you want to pursue and kind of the size and shape of what you want to pursue. Those are logistics, not actual concept docs. So what was important was that Jamie mentioned that this is the first time she's really recognized, and it might be us, we're not sure, that they actually noted how many topics, how many proposals, and how many final awards were selected. So it's a 7% award rate. So I just want to point that out. Yeah.
So the clarification on that is the way it was worded, I believe it was how many pre-proposals. So the big number, the 365, was the number of pre-proposal concept paper, white. I think they use different terminology because the way it was written, it was 365, and from a subset of that, the 26 awards were made. So we don't have information on when the cutoff was for there, and obviously how much work went into the concept paper may affect how likely it would be selected for the final round.
But generally speaking, from the white paper or the concept notes section, that you get down selected, and you usually have a 1 in 5, 1 in 8 chance, somewhere between them and there. So if they've selected your concept note, you have a better chance. No, that's how they think. Well, unless you have friends
No,
You can-
because
you
they
can
throw out the crap and then they keep it.
Oh,
yeah,
well.
So, yeah, so,
It's true. It's not invaluable.
yeah,
Well, they say.
right. So,
yes.
so the,
Okay, good point. So the
Yeah.
white papers are general open admission. Anybody and their mom can submit a white paper, and that's totally 365 people took advantage of that.
And then if you're down selected,
Then the program officer really likes you and understands, and then you're in that actual competition for that topic.
you've got to you really have to seriously prove yourself then, because you're competing with already pre-selected known commodities. That they
You're the
have.
top tier when you've been selected.
So it's not a probability.
But well, true, but it helps to know that you're in the top.
Yeah. But even being down selected is good.
Yes. Again, optimist. Okay, so then from her analysis, a couple years ago, we had a couple questions that were floating around for the MURI cycle. And from that, she did an analysis, Jamie did the analysis, and whether it needs, does your partner institution need to be a really strong contender? Do you have to have a fantastic background in prior research? Does herd funding and recognition favor the bold? No. Geographic? No. And principal investigator? No. So one of the common misconceptions is that a PI has to be senior and top of the game. That is not true. What she found that was heavily weighted in the award cycle was partner institution and composition of partner institution. And at least, I think the general rule is at least a couple outside your institution to partner with, and that you do have some background in it. And there was a question online.
There's a question from online from Justin Flory. In the solicitation, I'm sorry, does this mean that only one award per topic area, or do some topics not have any awards?
One award per topic area, every topic is awarded, unless there's like such bad. I mean, you got to get all 7 people to really write bad proposals.
Maybe I can comment on that.
Sure.
I think that the DOD used to give a split awards, say like 20 years ago. But starting recently, only one award, one time.
Why we have smart people in the room. Okay, so these are strategies and institutional strategies. What we want to do is grow partnership and awareness on the MURIs, which is part of this process, and making sure that people have what they need to get through it. GSI is a big proponent of working with the DOD and starting a portfolio and building that portfolio. So, and has major success in that area. And one of them is Young Investigator Awards, and that leads to larger and bigger, bolder awards. So what we're doing, we're trying to do more push out for this. And this is the timeline for, as posted in the solicitation. So it just kind of gives you an idea of where we're at right now, and you should be full on conceptualization for the next couple of months. Make sure your team is ready, and then get ready. The white paper, again, is 4 pages. We'll go through that a little bit. So it's the strongest 4 pages you can write, and you email it to the topic chief. Now this is challenging because every year we have to go out to the research administrators and say who submitted a concept note, because we want to track it passively, just in the aggregate. So we do recommend that you let your research administrator know. If nothing else, then you can show up in a graph for us later. But it's important to let people know that then we can track you and make sure that if the full submission invitation comes in, we can reach out to you and say, do you need support or help in any way, shape, or form? And that's true for Lightworks, that's true for GSI, that's true for all engineering. Tara Morley is on the line, and we all are here to help enable submissions. So white paper evaluation is important. It is topic chief dependent, so it is really important to reach out to them and make sure that you have what you need to be successful in evaluating that white paper or concept note. I think it's white paper, I'm sorry. So after submitting the concept note, you can use TRIPS funding. It's a KED program that allows you to pay for some of that travel to DC to meet your topic chief if you want to. And so it's something to get in the queue right now. It's 2 weeks in advance of the trip. 1 person goes round trip. So it's pretty minimal, but, and you'll want to ask for either your IIA or your department to match. And the link was prior. These slides and the recording will be sent out again with our update of the proposal docs and the analysis. And this was from last year's presentation because we think that this is your essential team member. And then KED will do full proposal support, but there are others on campus who will do full proposal support as well, and some of them are in units. So just know that you can get a lot of support. It's a big ask. The full proposal is a big ask. So, and then just if you're not familiar with proposal management, generally speaking, they help with a lot of teaming and getting things off the ground and making sure. I think Tony had a war room and Lisa had a war room, which was great because faculty don't generally ask for war rooms. But it's a dedicated place where you can actually work on a proposal at a dedicated time. And Tobin Spratt was a part of that effort. Okay, so as promised, jumping right into faculty expertise and experience in the program, I've randomly assembled this group, so there's no order whatsoever. But I wanted to make sure that Nancy Cook, who was beaming in, if she's available, she can go first. If not, you're on deck.
Yes, I'm here. Can you hear me?
I sure can, and now we can see your face.
Okay, good. Okay, so a little bit about my background with the MURI process. I have been involved in 3 different MURIs, one from ONR, 2 from ARO. I was not the PI or the prime institution on any of them. One thing that's really nice about them is that they can go on for 5 years. You have 3 years with a 2-year option. And so that gives you a lot of time to do something really fantastic. And the one thing that I've noticed about them is that the intent is that they are multidisciplinary. That has worked somewhat in the past, but the best, of the 3 MURIs I've been on, the best teamwork was done by, or the best collaboration was done by a team that was not so multidisciplinary. They were all psychologists of different ilks, like cognitive human factors or industrial organizational psychologists. I don't really think of that as multidisciplinary. It's like electrical engineers say, I do AC, you do DC, therefore I just don't see it that way. But that did happen to be the best collaboration. But interestingly, others that I've been on that were more multidisciplinary were really computer scientists and social scientists. But the collaboration went a little bit better for one than the other. And the reason I think it went well for one is that we had people who were more collaborative on the team and who really wanted to listen to other perspectives. One that didn't go so well is pretty much one where the program manager changed scope to kind of force out the social scientists, and it became all computer science. So I think a lot of it depends certainly on your team members, but also on the program manager. What I would recommend people do is, like has been said here, prepare a good white paper and also as many questions that you can for the program manager. You really want to get inside their head and figure out what it is they really want. And then I think next is to carefully assemble your multidisciplinary team. I think it's going to be really important, as I've found in my experience, who's on that team. Are they collaborative? Have you worked with them before? Do you know that? Are they coming from the disciplines that are required in order to address the topic? If you've had previous interactions with them, I think that also looks good. It seems like the ones that were selected, in my case, program managers felt comfortable and could trust the PI and the other team members in many cases. So if you can get to know the program manager really well or have somebody on the team who does, that would be helpful. The other thing that I think was helpful in some cases that spurred some multidisciplinary collaboration was to develop in the proposal a unifying framework. Often this is in the form of a chart, boxes and arrows, but use that to engage in significant discussion with all of the team members to try to understand different perspectives and kind of morph the chart as you go. That tends then from then on to pull people together around that framework. So, I mean, to me, the interesting thing about MURIs is that they're meant to be multidisciplinary, but in most cases, I have found that that is not the case. And what you get sometimes is, and some program managers care about this more than others, but it's not intended to be this way where people go off and work on their projects in their discipline. The other discipline goes off, works in their projects in their discipline, and they maybe come together at the very end to write a report. So, but they've been interesting experiences. I don't get Debbie Downer on it.
Okay, thank you. Do we have any questions for Dr. Cook? You can chime in online, or you can text me or email or write them out in the chat. If not,
this is Robert. Sorry, can you hear me?
Yep.
Yep.
Okay, so I was just curious. We never talked about this, but which do you think is more successful, like having a really good proposal team or sort of having the pre-blessing of the program officer or program manager?
Both. But certainly the pre-blessing is good. I mean, one of the ways they bless it is by accepting your white paper, but I think if you talk to them even before that and just toss around your idea with them, I think you'll get a pretty good feel for whether this is along the lines that they're thinking.
Okay, perfect.
I would just, and I think Tony would agree, I don't think those are independent. I think the way you get a good blessing is to build a team that your technical point of contact wants you to build. So.
A moment for Tony to chime in if he wants. Tony, do you want to chime in? Or?
Okay. Yeah, no, Lisa's right. So I think that it's both things. So one of the things I was going to say in my little 5 minutes here is that you absolutely have to make contact with the topic chief program manager to know what they're getting after. And I'll give you some examples in a few minutes, but yeah, it's both.
Great. With that, Jan,
Okay, all
explain
right.
yourself.
All right, thank you. This is Jan. I'm from electrical engineering, and I have four MURIs. One as a PI, and the other one as an acting PI because the PI got really sick in the first year. Yes, but we are not a leading institution, so I couldn't be the official PI, but I acted as a PI to guide the entire MURI for actually 6 years. And that's very surprising that because we did so well, and they gave us extra year funding, 1.5 million. Very rare, very rare, but it did happen. So that program just ended last 2018. Last year we got another MURI led by University of Arkansas. So my personal experience is it's quite a mixed because my first MURI was awarded in 2004. But my first MURI proposal was I can remember from 1998, I believe, and I didn't get anywhere, but I was invited to a full proposal. But I didn't get an award. But I think this probably is good story for a younger faculty. At that time I was associate professor. I just joined ASU 96. And so one day then there is a researcher from Air Force Research. I didn't know him. And he came to visit me. He said, we read your proposal. We like your ideas. And unfortunately, we're not funded. Okay, so they gave a award to a friend of mine at USC. But we could give you SBIR. So that was my first SBIR. I didn't have a company. I found a company, and so I got some money. So my personal experience is that at that time, of course, I didn't know anyone. I didn't know program manager. I didn't know how to write a MURI, and I just read the call proposal. I thought I'd get a good idea. So that's probably a useful experience. Now, the first MURI award, that's another important experience, is that, again, I saw an announcement, and I didn't know the program at all. That person is mechanical engineering, MW, right? So, but I read that announcement, I really thought we have a good idea. So I contacted all the other, I know it was pre-white, because there's only one group in the United States which is very active in that particular field. And so I contacted them, but they say, thank you very much, you have a great idea, but our team's full. Okay, so I almost gave up. But then the last minute I said, well, why not just submit a white paper? That time was 5 pages. So I did spend quite a bit of time wrote a white paper and I got invited. And so for full proposal, so that I spent more time. But anyway, long story short, so actually I was awarded. So that MURI was split into 2. So I knew that one, or they were the lead and they got I think they got 2/3 of funding, and my team got 1/3 of funding. But they give me instruction, you have to let some of people go. So I restricted my team, But anyway, so that was a wonderful MURI. So both of us, we worked together very nicely. So the lead that time was the University of Mexico. So, okay, so that was the experience. Now, I would say from a high level, I will say that for MURI program, there are 2 major aspects. One is that DOD doesn't want to have any surprise in terms of technology. I think that's for DARPA's job. Now, in the MURI, it's probably not in science. They don't want to have any surprise, discovered by other countries, So therefore, there are a lot of MURI programs to really frontier research, really at the edge, research like quantum materials, quantum sensing, quantum information, all this. Nobody really knows the real applications yet, right? But NSF, DOD is investing a lot of money. But the other part of it is that there are long-standing problems for existing technologies. And for instance, 2 out of these 4 MURI we got is about basic science of photo detectors, light detection. So light detection has a long history, but there are still a lot of fundamental science questions that are not fully answered. So there are a lot of MURI programs they support this kind of research because they have very clear applications, very, very clear applications out there. And so we got 2 out of that. And so it's really broad. It's very hard to use one sentence to describe MURI. Now, in terms of interaction with the program managers, I think there's a lot of good suggestions. I fully support those ideas. And the other thing I just want to add is that MURI is different from NSF. NSF is mainly decided by panels. Okay, the program manager has very little say, but the MURI, the program managers have a lot of say, but also the panels as well. But then you look at who are the people on the panels. So most of them, almost all of them, are from government labs. And I think if you read the government lab research papers, then you probably should be able to find out who are your, peers. And if you interact with them, that will be extremely helpful. And as I learned from an old friend of mine from AT&T Biolab, that he always telling people that you need to talk with your customer's customer. All right. So basically, you need to understand why this MURI topic comes up. What are the applications behind this? Oftentimes, due to limited lens, they don't say much about it. So if you really understand that, it will help you to really understand the call for proposal, and you can really write your proposal correctly or relevantly to the topic. And the other suggestion I have that you really have to read the call for proposal line by line, and even read between the lines. Okay, right? So really understand what they are looking for. And because oftentimes as a researcher, I do the same. I have my mindset, and sometimes glancing through something, I thought they were looking for some X, but actually probably they're looking for Y, right? Because I'm really biased by my experience. So, but it's always good. And I think someone mentioned earlier that you have a team together, brainstorm. Let's make sure whatever you write address exactly what they're looking for. So yeah, of course, the talk with program manager extremely important. If the program manager says, okay, don't submit, we're not interested in this, probably you better listen. But sometimes they are more encouraging. Even though they may have a very low level of interest, they don't say, don't submit. It's just, okay, yeah, why don't you try it, right? But if they really say that, well, we're not interested in that, probably that will save you some time. Yeah. For junior faculty members, my suggestion is that probably they should reach out to more senior ones. In general, statistically, based on my experience, that the PI of any MURI teams, they are more senior. At least associate professor. I haven't seen, very rarely, I think I saw one from Stanford that was led by assistant professor. That's very rare. But again, the multidisciplinary, this M, as I said, is multidisciplinary, but sometimes people thought it was multi-university. But the fact is that oftentimes the teams are people from multiple universities. And the reason for that is that you need to find the best people, not just your colleagues at the same university. And so then the results of that becomes multi-university, multidisciplinary program. Yeah. So I think that's probably all.
Okay. Any questions for Dr. Zhang? We did have a question, and I'll wait. We did have a question online. I just want to recognize that we got one online, but it's a really generic one, so I'm going to ask it at the end. Are there any questions specific to Dr. Zhang? No, that's a lengthy history. That's perfect. So, Dr. Jones?
Hi, I'm Anne. My history with MURIs is shorter. I am currently a member of a MURI, the PI lead institution of which is the University of Southern California. My story, however, is not so different from yours in that I actually had my first funding from AFOSR when I first came to ASU in 2007. And that certainly opened my eyes to how the system worked because, like an idiot, I submitted a proposal without ever talking to the program manager, only to discover that I happened, just totally by chance, to work on exactly what she was interested in. Had I read between the lines, I would have called. So to me, the biggest take-home message of all of these meetings, especially for new faculty, interacting with DOD agencies, is you absolutely must call. Because they have something very specific in mind. And if you think that says what you do, which is what all researchers do, you're wrong. Quite frankly, they want what they want. And they might even have someone in mind already. Quite often do have someone in mind already. And so quite by chance, I was funded, only to discover how cliquish the system is. And then by going to those program reviews, I met all the characters and learned what they really wanted. And that's how I ended up on MURI. The MURI topics are very specific interests of the program managers and usually tailored to a particular group. I think an unsolicited proposal has virtually no chance of success. And so you definitely want to talk to the program lead to find out what it is they're looking for. And then, much like Professor Zhang has said, I contacted the PI that I knew the proposal topic was written for, and I said, I have the skill that you need on your team. And I do, and he was funded. And I think that that's how many of these teaming arrangements work, right? The PI is an obvious person, and he's looking for the people who have the skills that the program manager wants. And so if you're part of that network already, you become part of those proposals. But if you're not, then you have to find the characters to become part of that network if you really want this type of funding.
It seems that people are chatting with me on that screen. So I'm gonna tell them, it's the second Faye Farmer that's logged in that you have to message. So I'm not getting the messages way over there. Just the world is coming to an end. There's two Fays. So when you say, I'm going to ask a real quick question, but when you do reach out, what form does that take?
To the program manager?
To the topic chief.
I mean, as you mentioned earlier, they're used to being reached out to. They recognize this is how the DOD system works. You can phone if that's really what you want to do, but most of them want a heads up that they want to talk to you or you want to talk to them. And so some brief introducing yourself, answering questions. Why do you need to know me? Is more likely to get a response than just, hey, I want to talk to you. So they are very much mission driven. I'm also funded through DOE, which is also a mission driven place. So that telling them exactly how your skill set, your research interest fits into their mission is I think the best way to make a first contact with a new program manager.
you said brief, which I want to highlight.
Very brief.
Because sometimes people will say, oh, I sent them my last 10 journal articles, you know, and I never received anything back. Well, yeah, they weren't going to have time to read your last 10 journal articles. You know, you sent them hundreds of pages. So I recommend like 3 sentences. And it's going to take like 45 minutes to write these 3 sentences, but still 3 sentences, like, what are you proposing? Why should they care about it? And then I like an attachment of either like a 1-page white paper or a quad chart. So it gives them a little more information, but yeah, it has to be very targeted.
Yeah, I write 1-page versions of everything that I'm thinking about proposing to anyone at the moment, following kind of your questions of what is it that I'm going to do and why, and who should care about it. And then I write 1 paragraph of words that go into emails for all projects as well. That, you know, in 1 sentence, it should tell you in the same sentence what the topic area is and why it's important.
Do you want to answer your question?
Yes, it's a quick one.
Well,
So,
actually, I want to jump on. The last thing I would say is also have it verbally ready in case you see this person at a conference and you're introduced to them. Then you remember their name and you say it in the elevator speech. Always have your elevator speech done for every proposal that's hot, because they actually remember that. I used to remember those more than the ones that came, because you get so many emails.
Yeah.
But if you bump into somebody at lunch or something, that sticks.
Well, and perhaps I didn't emphasize that enough. I mean, I think being initially funded through AFOSR, it's true that people from the Army labs are always at those program reviews, or from the DOD labs. And so you meet the people who ultimately become the reviewers, you meet the program managers. They invite other program managers to their reviews so that each is figuring out what's hot in those areas. And you make the contacts there in person. So that I actually started teaching elevator pitches in my classes, because I do think it's one of the most important things you do in those meetings.
No,
it's pretty common to reach out to program officers and not get a response. So is it a safe assumption that they're not interested, or is it a safe assumption that they're super busy, and if they want to tell you no, they'll tell you no?
I would say the second.
Okay, that's interesting.
So the second is they're super busy.
Try again.
They travel a lot. They can't bring all their computers. They don't want to respond on their BlackBerry. I mean, you know.
And it depends on what time of year you ping them. So
Yeah.
if they're out traveling doing review stuff, like even one that I have a really close relationship, he never responds promptly in those phases where he's out doing a lot of traveling. And then as soon as he's like going through all the papers again, like pinging in that window, he responds almost immediately. So you have to recognize that there's like seasonality to when they do stuff. There's a phase when they're expecting those reach outs, and having just released FOA is when they expect those reach outs.
Okay, so pause. I'm going to go online to Tony. You're next. Go give us your little spiel, please. Dr. Grubsek.
Okay, so I've had a mixed experience with MURIs. Elisa and I submitted one that we thought was fantastic and got a little bit of traction from the white paper, submitted the full proposal, no money. And then we followed up the next year, got some traction with the white paper, and we won the money. So I've been on both sides of this. I think I'm sort of working off your talking points here, Faye. I think there are some real benefits to submitting and preparing the proposal. Of course, the white paper is probably the most important thing. It has to be spot on. You talk about spending 45 minutes writing a paragraph. You need to spend like 2 months writing this white paper and really put a lot of thought into it. Because that's ultimately what gets you in the door for the full proposal. And as Faye mentioned, once you're in that pool, there may be only 4 or 5 other teams competing for that big pot of money. So it's a great position to be in, and certainly better odds than, you know, through NSF or some other agency that, you know, 300 proposals and they're evaluating them all simultaneously. So it's a good pool to get into. So the other benefits, like if you sort of think about a big picture, regardless of success or failure, I think, you know, I'm speaking with my associate dean for research hat on here, but it really helps PIs to congeal their thinking on research. So worst case, you spin the proposal into some good publications, right? Do some of the science. Best case, you win the money, but it's always possible to resubmit portions to other funding agencies. So that's exactly what we did with our first MURI. We submitted it with a company and got money from Defense Threat Reduction Agency and DARPA. So no scrap goes to waste. I mean, it really gives you the space to spend some time thinking about your science. And then even if you don't win, you've got a lot of time to think about your science. So that's good. I think the other big benefit that people need to be aware of is that it really does facilitate new collaboration. So, the team that we put together when I was at ASU, from the Watts College, we had Elisa, who's a mathematical sociologist, me, I'm a geographic information scientist. We had a mathematical geographer from COLA on this. And then we had ecologists and biologists from University of Texas and MURI. It's a group of people that never would have normally worked together, but did to get this MURI money. So it was a fantastic way to really get in this interdisciplinary science. And it's been a lot of fun up to this point. So where the contact with the topic chief, this is, I think, probably, and I was mentioning this is probably the most critical thing. So we had a really surprising and important phone call with our topic chief. Initially, we had read the project description. It was on pollen, climate change, those kinds of things. And we had given this a ton of thought and thought that we had really nailed this topic. We were going to talk about invasive species, climate change, tracking pollen as climate change starts to, or as they like to call it now, environmental change, starts to roll across the globe. But when we called the topic chief, she wanted to know about how you could use pollen to track guns, explosive devices, IEDs. So really, really ultra specific. And we had to scramble, change the team to get this white paper written. So without that phone call, we would have blindly submitted something we thought was amazing, and they had absolutely no interest in that. So you really do have to talk to the program manager and the topic chief. So it was a weird experience, but very, very meaningful. And then lastly, what are some of the benefits to the award and recommendations for those considering? I'd say do it. I mean, anything that pays for your effort, gets students involved, get to do your research is a good thing. And they're really willing to consider some interesting projects. So again, don't sleep on the white paper. It's the most important thing that you're going to write. And also know that it's a team effort, and Faye alluded to this. You can't do this alone, right? You need support from ASU or UT. And when we were at ASU, we got fantastic support through Tobin and Faye's office. So it was a good experience. But again, there's no way you can put this stuff together alone. You need people checking that you've got your I's dotted, T's crossed. So it really is a team effort.
I will, just as a follow-up from that cycle, we had 4 white papers going in that cycle, and one was a similar topic, and I've been invited to full. And after a topic chief discussion, they decided not to submit a full proposal because of that exact thing, was that it was so specific, and they had come in orthogonally and didn't realize it couldn't pivot enough to write a comprehensive full proposal, so they actually were opted out. So in that case, your pool of invited full proposals actually went down by 1 in that particular topic. So, and just as a note, if you are invited and run anything through our office, we firewall both teams so that they generally don't know about one another, for the most part. But that was an interesting experience that had never happened to me before, is someone to opt out of a full proposal.
I just want to jump. Tony, do you want to also talk about the fact that how we that several people on the team were already funded by the TPOC
So one of our team members during that phone call with the topic chief, she actually mentioned him and said, "Hey, this is stuff that Barry Brosi does." And so she knew exactly the players that she wanted involved ahead of time. And so then it was my job and Lisa's job to convince Barry to join our team, because frankly, he was approached by 3 or 4 other teams, right? So there are going to be some really important hubs to this topically. Your program managers will know who those people are, and they want to see them. They want an all-star team. So if you can manage to convince that group to get together and work together, that's a good thing. But yeah, they definitely know who they want to see involved, and they had funding previously. So there was some familiarity and knew that the deliverables weren't outlandish when you say you were going to deliver something.
Okay. Any questions for Dr. Hubasek? Okay, so I'm sitting on my generic one. Lisa.
Well, I think almost everything that I would want to say has already been said in one shape or form or another. I will say that I come to the MURI program a little bit differently. My first exposure to MURI was as a MURI program manager. And so I managed MURIs before I ever proposed for one. And I did that out of Army Research Office. And so I not only am a nervous, I did both. So, and other things as well. But so I know the perspective of the program officer, and I think that knowing a little bit or wrapping your head a little bit around what your program officer needs to do and what their priorities are is a good way to engage with them with regard to proposing and figuring out what you need to provide to them so that they could make the case to fund you. The teaming is really important, and the reason why they want to go to teams that they're familiar with or funded before is because there's a lot at stake, and it's very high profile from that perspective in MURI. And if their meeting fails, it doesn't look good to them and their bosses. And so if you get a MURI once every few cycles, you don't usually get a MURI every cycle like you do other programs. So usually what this is a coalescence of several of the things that they're working on, where they can bring it all together and maybe make an advance and expand the science so that you get more, sort of bang for your buck. Even though it's a lot of bucks, but it's a multiplier effect that they're looking for. And because they're looking for that multiplier effect, if it's good, that's great. But if there's risk, that's something that they want to minimize. And minimizing risk in science has, a downside too. So what they want to do at least is get people they trust. They want to get a track record. They want to know what's out there and want what they're doing. And the other thing is, when you're writing the proposal, even though they're the ones that decide, the panel looks at it. And so what they want in the proposal are the things that can easily cut and paste out to demonstrate to their peers and to their supervisors the value. So if you phrase things in your Heilmeyer, and you phrase things in, you put things in nice little tables that are concise that they can use in PowerPoints, then they're like, oh yeah, this is somebody I want to work with because they're communicating to me in a way that I need to communicate up the chain, and I don't have to work as hard translating their work into what I need for my job because I'm really busy. And so I think that that's another thing when you're thinking about engaging. These are usually very smart people. They you might not think that somebody's in your field or across the board, but that doesn't mean that that program officer is not going to be the one evaluating you later on. So it's nice it's smart to listen and try to meet all the people within these government agencies. Even NSF could be on a panel on your particular proposal. But I think that that's the sort of the cumulative feature is that you want to think about what they need to do their job well and to advance the science for the mission that they're trying to serve. And if you give them what they need, then they'll appreciate it. And intrinsically, there's some reciprocity there, and they'll want to find you. Now, I did also want to say something else you posed, and that is, in the old days, you're right, if things were wired, they might be able to take some elements of one. DARPA can still do that. They can mix and match. But MURIs can't. And because that, one of the other things about this cliquishness, if you have the feeling that it's so wired that you can't compete, these are really hard, labor-intensive proposals to write. Just pass it on and wait for your next opportunity. As much as you don't, but on the other hand, writing these things is a good experience in some sense, and making the cut is a good experience. As Tony said, we did that when the first year. We were asked to propose to lots of different avenues. Unfortunately, some of them I don't think have a high probability because they've lost their funding streams in social science. But the other point is that when you work on a proposal of the type that's MURI, you're going to come up with really good ideas, really novel collaborations, things that could eventually fit other calls for proposals, and so it's not a wasted investment time. And it's something that I think is worthwhile there. So I will stop and discuss.
So I still have my generic thank you. Lisa, just as a shout out, she came to last year's kickoff as well. So there's a lot of expertise around the campus, and just the willingness to participate is always recognized and appreciated. So thank you very much. So the first generic question I had was how diverse in terms of PIs have your MURIs been? So any female faculty leads, any kind of ethnic diversity. Because we did establish that a geographic diversity is not essential. It is the top tier group that applies. So is there a note to that? Sometimes I can see where that would come up in terms of designing a massive center for NSF. That is a point that people make.
I mean, I'm part of a really diverse team, both scientifically and demographically. Our PI is a Palestinian man. We also have an African American man. I'm a woman. There's a Latino man and an Asian man, and 2 white American guys. And I don't think they can. That's not how we put the team together. And in fact, when the program manager found out that I had kids and was going to take like a week off when my last was born, like at the first week of the MURI, there were some negative comments. I don't think DOD can.
Where's the work? Where's the work?
You felt like you needed a whole week?
I mean, I sent some mails while I was in labor, but.
Is there a consensus around that?
I think so. I think because they're mission oriented.
Yeah.
Right. It's
Get
not.
the job done.
Yeah.
Okay, so the next one was, what about inviting non-US universities to co-apply? For example, a member of Plus Alliance. So ASU has stood up this agreement between King's College and University of New South Wales, and is there room for collaborators across the ocean to participate? I will say topic 12 does have an actual stipulation where it's seeking co-funding for Australian federal grants as well, or awards. So what I would look at is topic 12. It has to do with robotics, and I sent a massive email out to a lot of the robotics faculty here at ASU. And if you need additional information on our connections through Plus Alliance, I CC'd Sarah Jones, who's the director of the Plus Alliance here at ASU. But that's separate from other collaborations across the oceans. Are they international collaborations, or are they just focused on national collaborations?
I would say majority is a domestic. I haven't seen any, but doesn't mean that it's completely excluded, as you just pointed out. I think a couple of years ago, there was one probably just encouraging teaming with the UK. Very rare. In our field.
Yeah, I would say there's 2 things. One, and Nancy Cook mentioned that, and some of the MURI she was on, they were very sort of 6 PIs doing their own thing. I know that on panels that I've sat on and the reviews that I've sat on, if that's the case, I've seen all, people's funding cut for MURIs. They really want integration. They could spend a lot less money getting everybody as independent investigators. So one of the challenges is if it's in the UK or someplace else, they might be concerned about managing the proposal. Unless there's a specific reason for it, then you can justify it. But none of these are classified, so there's 6-1 basic research, so there should be no problem. Unless, Jane, do you have anything to add? Do you know?
No, I concur with something.
Yeah.
Any other questions? We're right on time.
If the best person in the world to do something is in anywhere, they want that person.
Parting words for going back. And if that person is not you, then you can call that person out.
If that person, if you know that person, and you have no skills or anything on that stuff, and you could coordinate that person with another person, then you could be the PI on a MURI and just be the linchpin that ties it together. I mean, as far as the PI goes, yes, we need Tony on this paleontology thing, because without him, I don't know how this would work. But what really matters is the breadth of the team and the lines on how they're going to work together and the integration. Like, that's really what I think is most important about a MURI, is that they're going to take these individuals and pull them together to make value add that you couldn't get otherwise.
So one thing I probably would have added, which hasn't been discussed, is that how MURI topics are generated. I think that's probably it's good for faculty members to start work with program managers and understand what they're looking for. And sometimes we have good ideas, just feed them. And the program managers, they're very busy. They're very good technically, but clearly they cannot be as good as individual faculty members in that particular field. So they love to listen to the new ideas. So if they're good ideas, you can find application, feed to them. So sometimes they collect all these ideas and then form a MURI topic.
So we generally recommend, just based on what we know, and correct me if I'm wrong, Jamie, was that that's a fall activity. And so we're very, the push there is to go out, make your white paper, send it out to the topic chiefs, make a follow-up meeting, and then try and socialize the heck out of that from November to December. And this is going to make me nervous because there's like a lot of messages up there. But you're absolutely right. Thank you for bringing that up. This is focused on the solicitation. We haven't matured to the point where we can do early socialization. So let's see, it's 11 chats. I only have 9 down below. Hopefully they're not. Oh no, they're all there. Okay, so those are the ones that I answered. Okay. Are any other questions while we have a minute and a half? Otherwise, I think we're good. I want to say thank you very much for UT Austin dialing in, Dr. Grubasek. I really appreciate your time today.
My pleasure. Thanks.
Great. And Nancy, thank you very much for dialing in. I know you're very busy as well, so I appreciate that. I know the rest of us are busy, but special shout out to that.
Thank you.
Okay, great. And I'll send the recording out to everyone who's registered. If you have other people you want to forward this to, feel free. Thank you all for attending in person and online. I appreciate your attention to this. Feel free to reach out to any of the people who presented today for additional questions. I'm volunteering with you guys to answer questions. If you want to punt them to me, that's fine too. Okay, and with that, thank you very much. You guys are free to go.